As was his usual custom, the prince woke well before dawn and began a leisurely stroll toward the royal gardens. It was here that he spent much of his time, for his father was still quite healthy, and being the youngest of three brothers, his royal duties didn't amount to much. He'd spent many, many hours at this gardens from the time that he had been a young boy. And as he entered the gardens and followed the narrow winding pathways, he came to his favorite spot. A little knoll, a small hill as it was, with a stone bench carved and quite handy to sit on and watch the sunrise. It was his favorite spot because he could see the first rays of the sun as they crested the far-off hills, and the beauty of the dawn and the sunrise was always magnificent from this spot. He had spent much of his childhood playing in these gardens, and he had found the spot where he now sat many years before. In fact, the thing that made the spot the most special of all was the stone princess, or at least that's what he called her. You see, directly across from the bench that he would sit and watch the sunrise, the very beautiful stone carving. So old, in fact, that it had been lost to palace records of where the statue had come from. The king had found it in its very spot when he had built his palace, his castle, and had built the gardens around it because it was such a lovely object. The princess sat on a throne of stone, wearing robes of stone, hair that piled beautifully on top of her head, flowing down her back, and an outstretched hand. And in the hand stood a small bird, and the bird looked directly into the princess's eyes, and she looked back as if forever locked in her stone condition, that her and the bird shared something special, something unknown to anybody else. It was such a morning as this that the prince sat and with his face turned towards the beginning of the dawn. As the sun crept just barely over the trees in the far-off distance and the sky just began to lighten, he heard a sound. It caught his ear, and he turned, and when he did, he could not believe what he saw, for the little stone bird in the hand of the princess suddenly fluttered his wings, gave a chirp, and flew off. As he sat there, amazed at what he had seen, he became even more amazed and maybe a little frightened as, almost imperceptibly, the stone princess began to move. It was a quiver at first, and then the eyes began to show signs of life, and the eyelids began to quiver, and the hand that had been holding the bird began to curl the fingers in. And there, right before the prince, the cold stone princess became a living, breathing, beautiful woman. The prince sat there with fixed gaze upon the princess, and his mouth just kind of dropped open before he wanted to speak. But what do you say to a statue that has suddenly become alive? The princess spoke first. "Good morning, Prince. How fortunate that on this very day you have chosen to come to the garden. Well, I guess I shouldn't be surprised, for you come to the garden almost every day." I don't understand. I see what is right before me, but I don't think I believe it. I must be dreaming. "No, you are not dreaming," the princess said in a beautiful, melodious voice. "For you see, I must explain to you what you are now witnessing as you sit here in this garden. 200 years ago, I was but a stone, and this stone sat on the side of a hill. And a man came along. A man with power of magic in his hands. And he took this stone and he set it upon the floor of his house, and he began to work with his hammer and his chisel. Until he, after a very long period of time, had carved what you have seen for many years sitting in this garden. When he had finished carving the statue, me, he took it from his home, and he searched the whole countryside for a spot where the sun's early rays would first hit. And he found this little hill. And he set that statue here. And he said these words. He said, every 100 years, this stone, this statue, shall become alive. And for the time that the sun's rays strike this hill, until they go down on that day, you, princess, shall live. And then he left that statue here. And 100 years ago, before anybody lived in this area, before your father had come and built his castle, I sat. And 100 years ago, as I sat here, and the rays of sun came over that hill, I felt life enter me. And for that entire day, I was alive. And I could sit here on my throne, and I could see all the world around me, and feel the warmth of the sun, and be alive. I could hear the creatures around me. And just before the sun went down on that day, almost as if the gift, a small bird landed on the arm of my throne here, and I held out my hand, and he hopped into it. And as I held it up to gaze at him, the last rays of light departed, and I became again the Stone Princess. And it is for that 100 years that I have sat here and waited for this day. And now you understand. The prince shook his head as if in disbelief, but yet he knew it was true because she sat here in front of him. May I do something for you, princess? May I get you something? May I bring you food to eat? No, she spoke slowly. What I would like most of all is for you to tell me of all the things that you have seen. For you see, I have never seen anything but the garden right here in front of me. And I'm sure as obvious by your dress, you're a wealthy man and you must have traveled. Tell me what the world is like. And so he began to tell her. And for hours, he sat in front of her, and she sat just unable to do anything but listen to the wonders that he spoke. She had him describe every little thing that he had seen, everywhere that he had gone. And almost suddenly, the prince gazed and looked at the sky, and he saw that much of the day was gone. Princess, I do not want this day to be over. I've enjoyed this day more than any other time in my life. You have given me much today, my prince. You have given me something that I only could have dreamed of having. I must confess to you that I've watched you grow from a small child when you very first began to come to this garden. I've watched you grow and become a young man, a strong man. I've watched you become what you are today. But I must understand a little more. Do you hear? Do you smell? Do you feel cold? Do you feel hot? Does time drag on and do you not go crazy waiting for the time when you will be alive one day? No, I can see that which is directly in front of me, where my eyes last gaze before the sun goes down. That's what I can see. Time has no meaning, I suppose. The only time that I have known is the day before, 100 years ago, and today. I guess time has no meaning. It is just there. But you see now the sun is almost gone, and I feel sadness. Princess, the prince spoke softly. I know that you have no way of knowing this, but from the time I have been but a young boy, I have loved you. I know it sounds strange to love a stone, a statue, but I've always known there was something different about you, something that I could not describe, and that is why this has always been my favorite spot, to come and sit and gaze at you. Well, I know, said the princess. For all of these years that I have sat, and you have come and sat in that bench and looked at me, I was looking at you, and although I do not understand how it could be, I do believe that I love you too. But such love is foolishness. It is time for you to leave, my prince. Leave? Why, I shall never leave here again, princess. I shall stay in this spot. I will have the servants bring me food. I will have them bring me water. I will build a shelter over you. And when the snow comes, the snow will not sit on you. When the rain comes, you will not get wet. When it gets cold, I shall take and wrap a blanket around you. You are my princess. I shall forever take care of you. No, my prince, you do not understand. I do not feel cold or hot or rain. I am just here. And when another 100 years has passed, once again I shall come alive for my day. But now that I have had a chance to meet you and know you, even though for a short while, I do know what love means, I believe. And I could not bear to watch you do these things for me and grow old. I could not bear to watch your hair turn gray and the muscle fall from your body, and you someday lay down and die. And when my time of life would come again, there would only be your dust. No, I could not. You must leave. For you see, I will age only one day every 100 years. I have a very long time to sit in this garden. Well, I shall take you to my castle. I shall take you and set you in the corner of my room. No, for if you do that, the spell is broken. No, I must stay here. For even though I will only live one day every 100 years, that one day is valuable to me. I must stay here so that I can become alive again. Prince, please, I would like you to do one thing for me, though, as I see now there are but moments left. Please pick me a bouquet of flowers and give them to me, that I may gaze at them, and when the sun passes, they shall too become stone, and like me, they will no longer age, and I will have these beautiful flowers to look at, to remind me of you. With a heavy heart the prince rose and picked only the loveliest flowers, and then he returned and knelt in front of the princess and held them out to her, as at the same time they both looked to see the sun, the last rays of the day, begin to disappear. "I feel cold," said the princess, "so cold." As she reached for the flowers, their eyes met, and at the last moment, the prince dropped the flowers and took her hand. "I will never leave you." And then they both became stone.